We've convinced ourselves that happiness requires $1 million. As long as we don't have that amount, we're left unfulfilled. Looking at the world's wealth distribution, where millionaires are rare, this would mean happiness is in limited supply, scarce even. Now imagine that despite all efforts, we've saved $100,000. To many, this would seem like a fortune, yet compared to our self-imposed goal, we're still $900,000 in the red. Being in debt, whether financially or mentally, feels burdensome. It's as though we owe something that, in this case, can only be repaid by achieving a desire we've placed far out of reach. When our happiness depends on what's hard to obtain, life becomes an uphill battle. We're constantly worrying, whether about not having enough or the fear of losing what we've managed to gather. But there's a better way forward, adopting a minimalist mindset that centers around abundance. The truth is, if we lower our demands, we'll quickly find ourselves surrounded by more than enough. The less we want, the more we have, and suddenly, life feels more generous. The anxiety over gain and loss diminishes, and we become more at peace with change. In this video, we'll explore how cultivating satisfaction with less leads to a more carefree life, unlocking a mindset of abundance instead of scarcity. The trap of conditional happiness. When happiness is hard to come by, we start chasing after it like a mirage. We often set rigid conditions for happiness, whether it's material wealth, status, the perfect relationship, or a combination of all three. The problem is, as long as those conditions aren't met, we remain dissatisfied, and even when we finally achieve them, the fear of losing what we've worked so hard to attain keeps us on edge. Imagine spending your entire life trying to tick off every box on your perfect life checklist, whether it's a dream house, an ideal family, or career success. What happens when even one thing is missing or falls short of perfection? It's like a house of cards. Everything collapses. The more specific and demanding our conditions for happiness are, the harder it becomes to actually be happy. This is the essence of the backwards law. The more we need to be satisfied, the less satisfaction we find. Conversely, when we require less from the world, we start to experience a sense of abundance, redefining what's enough. Abundance, in its truest sense, means having more than enough. But what qualifies as enough is entirely subjective. For some, it feels like there's never enough. For others, the simplest of things can suffice. What's interesting is that our idea of what's enough often shifts over time. Think back to your college days, where having a bit of money for food and parties might have felt like plenty. Fast forward to now, and even a salary 10 times larger might seem insufficient. But the good news is, we can always change our perceptions of what's enough. When we learn to lower our needs, it becomes easier to find contentment. The less dependent we are on external factors, the less the world's volatility affects us. It's like the ocean. Despite the constant changes the Earth has undergone, it remains vast and abundant. Living with essentials, living with freedom. Imagine being perfectly content with just the basics: clothing, food, shelter, and some company every now and then. If your happiness hinges on what's already abundant, it becomes far easier to maintain. When you depend on things that are always available, the threat of scarcity no longer looms over you. The less we need, the stronger our position becomes. That said, it's not about eliminating desires altogether. It's about managing them wisely. As Epicurus once said, if you want to make a man happy, add not unto his riches, but take away from his desires. 3 ways to shift from scarcity to abundance. Mastering moderation. Epicurus taught us the value of distinguishing between different types of desires: the necessary and natural, like food and shelter; the unnecessary but natural, like luxury; and the completely vain, like wealth and fame. It's the first category that truly matters for our well-being, while the others, especially the vain desires, often lead to dissatisfaction. In today's world, we have an abundance of pleasures, whether it's music, games, or videos, but overindulging in them causes us to need more and more to feel satisfied. By practicing moderation, as the Stoics advised, we can control our desires rather than let them control us. This way, we preserve the joy that comes from life's simple, abundant pleasures. Gratitude for what we already have. Humans have a tendency to focus on what they don't have, ignoring what's already in their possession. But doing this leads to dissatisfaction, forcing us to chase after new things. Instead, when we turn our attention to what we already have, we unlock an easy, accessible source of joy. Take, for instance, the house you live in. It may seem too small, too old, or not stylish enough, but it still serves its purpose. It shelters you. When we shift from dissatisfaction to gratitude, the same house suddenly feels more valuable. Gratitude not only brings satisfaction, but saves you from unnecessary spending. Contemplating the true price of our desires. Everything we want comes with a cost, whether it's monetary or something more valuable, time and life energy. As Thoreau wisely said, the price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. Before pursuing a desire, ask yourself, how much of my life am I willing to trade for this? The things that cost us the least in terms of time, stress, or energy bring us the most abundant rewards. When we begin to focus on desires that are easy to fulfill, abundance becomes the norm rather than the exception.